a member of the Stellaron Hunters, a dashing, collected, and professional beauty. Her hobby is shopping for and organizing her collection of coats. Kafka is a 5-star lightning character that specializes in applying a strong DOT that she can forcefully detonate. She follows the Nihility path. As a Nihility class character, her main theme will be focused around debuffs. In Kafka's specific case, that will be her ultimate's DOT, which can also be applied through her other attacks. Kafka's ability to detonate DOTs isn't exclusive to her own debuffs. She can also detonate the DOTs applied by her teammates. As a lightning element character, this means that if Kafka is able to deplete an enemy's toughness bar, she will deal decent amounts of extra damage and inflict shock that deals damage over time. Lightning element's break effect deals a decent amount of upfront damage and damage over time. Knowing the details of the lightning element's break effect is important, because Kafka herself could forcefully detonate its DOT as well. This means a bit of extra break effect stats won't hurt Kafka's build. But ultimately, you'd prefer Kafka detonating physical or winds break effect due to each element's stronger DOT. Looking at Kafka's whole kit, there's one thing that stands out the most. Her ultimate, which is the source of her strong DOT. Using level 10 traces, this DOT would deal 290% of Kafka's attack stat per tick. Not to mention, her ultimate also has the ability to forcefully detonate it and deal damage equal to 100% of its original. Similar to her ultimate, Kafka's skill also has the ability to forcefully detonate DOTs, but with lower efficiency. Using level 10 traces, the forced detonation deals damage equal to 75% of the original. It is important to note that her skill's forced detonation only applies to the main target, unlike Kafka's ultimate that forcefully detonates all DOTs applied to all targets. Kafka's technique and follow-up attack could also apply the strong DOT coming from her ultimate, further emphasizing how important it is to her whole kit. While Kafka's strong DOT is applied to the enemy, you simply make sure to keep detonating it with her skill. This makes her standard attack pattern pretty simple. You use her skill and make sure she triggers a follow-up every turn. By doing this 3 times consecutively, she would gain a total of 90 energy from her skill and a total of 30 energy from her follow-up attacks. Overall, gaining 120 energy, which allows her to use her ultimate and fully reset her rotation. It would be great if Kafka is able to use her ultimate more frequently, but unfortunately, there's no energy breakpoint for Kafka even if she uses an energy rope or Von Wack Plano set. The only way to reduce Kafka's 3-turn ultimate rotation by 1 turn is to get her 4th Eidolon, signature LC, and pair it with an energy rope. But only if she is against one target. If she fights at least 2 enemies at the same time, you don't particularly need her signature LC. Now that we have her standard attack pattern, I will use it in my calculator to figure out her best gears and light cones. Before we start, here's some quick disclaimer. Just pause if you actually want to read it. As most of you have already guessed, nothing beats Kafka's signature LC, patience is all you need. This is Kafka's stats using rank 1 of her signature LC versus 1 target and versus 2 targets. Kafka deals roughly 45% more damage if fighting 2 targets. So not only does she have competitive single target damage, she also boasts very strong AoE capabilities. But of course, it's hard to get a grasp of Kafka's damage output without another character to compare to. Luckily, we have Blade, who is also known for both his competitive single target damage and great AoE damage dealing capabilities. This is Blade's minimum stats using his signature LC at rank 1. Before proceeding with the comparisons, I would like to emphasize on the words Blade's minimum stats. It means that the calculation assumes he is just free hitting the enemy without taking any damage himself. It also assumes that he doesn't use any premium healer. So what I'm trying to say is that Blade could drastically improve his performance if we add assumptions that he is getting hit frequently, and if he is with a strong healer like Luocha. We'll ignore the damage they dealt over 7 cycles because Kafka only gets an extra turn within 6 cycles, thanks to the speed boost coming from her signature LC. This means that we can keep the comparison limited to their DPT, as long as the battle is shorter than 6 cycles. With that out of the way, let's compare them. As you can see, Kafka deals roughly 33% more damage than Blade on a single target, and roughly 30% more damage than Blade if there are 2 targets. I can already hear the complaints. But Dreamy, how is this possible? My Blade should be stronger. Again, context is important. This is just compared to Blade's minimum performance. Not to mention, Kafka is SP negative while Blade is almost SP neutral. To be fair, I also had doubts myself, so I asked another theory crafter, Guoba certified, for their opinion on this matter. Apparently they had similar findings that Kafka's damage is just that high. They too started having doubts, so they tried to confirm it with other TCs, and surprisingly, it all aligns. Kafka does indeed have insane amounts of damage output. Now let's take a look at Kafka's best free-to-play LC. You probably have guessed it already as well. That's gonna be Fermata, a light cone that can be purchased from the Forgotten Hall shop, or could be a drop from Echo of War. Rank 1 Patience is roughly 25% stronger than Rank 5 Fermata, but don't forget about the total actions I've mentioned earlier when comparing Kafka and Blade. If you can clear faster than 6 cycles, the speed boost of Rank 1 Patience won't matter anymore, and the difference would go down from 25% to around 12%. Finally, our special mention. Good night and sleep well. No, I'm not ending the video. The name of the LC is Good Night and Sleep Well. Some call it Pila LC. Rank 1 Patience is roughly 8% stronger than Rank 5 Good Night. But if we remove that extra turn from Rank 1 Patience, the difference between the 2 LCs would be close to nothing. Yes, you heard that right. If you clear a stage with less than 6 cycles used, there is almost no difference between the damage output of Rank 1 Patience and Rank 5 Good Night. So for those who own an S5 Good Night, you don't particularly need Kafka's signature LC unless you are using Good Night LC on another character. Here's a quick zero-context LC ranking for Kafka. With such a strong DOT coming from Kafka's ultimate combined with her forced detonations, this automatically means that a huge part of Kafka's damage output will come from her DOT. There is also the fact that DOTs cannot land a critical hit. Therefore, Kafka scales really well with attack stat. As shown on the LC section, I do have my own Kafka spreadsheets, and yes, after a bunch of comparisons, there is no doubt that attack is better when it comes to Kafka's individual performance. Note: individual performance. Asta will be one of the best harmony to pair with Kafka. And as some of you have already guessed, things do start to change when factoring in support. Let's start with Rank 1 Patience. So instead of an attack body relic being significantly stronger, the damage output of Kafka with a crit body relic is not much different anymore. Normally, a crit body relic should start scaling better, but the erode coming from Kafka's signature LC just makes her scale too well with attack. Now let's look at the difference when using Rank 5 Good Night. Since Good Night LC doesn't have erode, Kafka starts to scale better with a crit body relic, just slightly better. This also means that if you add more support, then Kafka stacks more and more attack stat diminishingly. With 2 supports, Kafka would start scaling better towards crit stats. Even better if you have a good amount of crit damage substats. And what happens if your carry had 2 supports with the last slot reserved for a survivability character? You get the solo carry setup. In short, Kafka is indeed viable as a solo carry, but with a standard crit build. I plan to make a whole separate video for this, so please look forward to it. As mentioned near the beginning of the video, Kafka's skill and ultimate can forcefully detonate DOTs, including DOTs applied by her teammates. This is how Kafka got her nickname as the DOT driver. Naturally, Kafka will be synergistic with characters that apply strong DOTs such as Sampo, Luca, and Sushang. Now, I can already see your eyebrows rising after I mentioned Sushang, but let me continue with the guide for now. Before I start, I want to mention that I did not make spreadsheets for MOC simulations that factor into a full team. I feel like there's just way too many assumptions to add that it starts being impractical, but that's just a personal opinion. However, one thing I can say for sure is that I ran different team compositions with Kafka and tested each intensively. I made sure that the investments were equal and tried them on battles that favored each of their own setup. Let's start with probably the most hyped character that players plan to pair with their Kafka, Sampo. Sampo most likely has the highest damage ceiling if paired with Kafka. Even on my tests, the numbers Sampo creates with Kafka are very high. Not to mention, Sampo also technically supports Kafka by boosting Kafka's DOT through his ultimate's debuff. However, there are glaring issues with his playstyle. 1. While the damage ceiling with Sampo is high, the issue is how Sampo struggles to get his stacks going. It is important to note that a huge part of Sampo's DOT will also come from the 3 stacks of wind shear applied by the wind's break effect. So until you have all the wind shear stacks applied, don't expect any fancy numbers. 2. Sampo struggles a lot on multiple targets. Sampo's ultimate is AoE, but it doesn't mean he could actually spam it. His playstyle requires him to use his skill less frequently compared to his basic attacks for maximum efficiency. This causes him to have slow energy gains and be unable to spam his ultimate. This is most notable when fighting 2 bosses at MOC. 3. Combining 1 and 2, you will realize how fast the Kafka-Sampo pair burn through cycles without any significant damage going. Sampo basically has a wind-up time, pun not intended. But of course, if the enemies have wind element weakness and you don't have any other damage dealers you could use due to bad matchups, then yes, Sampo being enabled by Kafka is perfectly viable. Next, Luca and Sushang. You might be wondering, why the heck is Sushang in here? First, let's take a look at this damage screenshot. Can you guess which bleed damage is from Luca's skill and which one is from Luca's physical break? If you've been playing with Sushang since forever, you'll easily know the answer. That 4,800 plus bleed damage is from Luca's skill, while the 15,200 plus bleed damage is from Luca's physical break. Because Luca's bleed damage from his skill is capped by his attack stat, it doesn't do that much compared to physical's break effect. And who else is amazing at applying physical break? Sushang, especially with her E4 that further increases her break effect stat. Based on my tests with Luca, I can get significantly faster runs compared to Sampo. Luca having a good kit overall and having a more reliable break simply creates way better results with Kafka. What about Serval? A Kafka-Serval pair would still be viable, but sometimes, what you need is an optimal team. I wouldn't consider the pairing of the two as one of Kafka's optimal team setups. Now that we know more about Kafka, here are some sample team setups for her. I personally think that at least one support is mandatory. This could be Asta or Silverwolf. Asta offers 2 stats that Kafka really wants, attack and speed. Not to mention, Asta applies these buffs to the whole team. Meaning, if there's another DOT character in the team, they get enabled as well. However, Asta has some serious problems if she isn't using the correct build, fighting against enemies that are not weak to her element, or is simply lacking Eidolons. I recommend the 3-turn ultimate rotation build for Asta that only uses basic attacks, but it will require E4 at minimum. Silverwolf is another option because defense and resistance shred not only applies to DOTs coming from your characters, but also applies to break effect damage and its DOT. Being able to add element weaknesses also means that you can assist the main DOT character in depleting the toughness bar. An alternative to Silverwolf is Pela. The 3rd slot is for survivability. The options should be obvious, but Natasha is a special mention. Natasha spamming basic attacks to generate SP helps either Luca or Sushang with the toughness bar. Unfortunately, there's no wind preservation or abundance yet to assist Sampo. Last slot should be obvious as well. This is where your second DOT character goes. You simply use a character that has the correct element depending on the stage you're trying to clear. As mentioned earlier, the solo carry Kafka setup is for another video. Overall, Kafka is a very strong character. She is unique for introducing a new playstyle that focuses around DOTs. Should you try to pull or build Kafka if you get the chance? Yes and no. Yes, because she has relatively close performance to Blade, and people should know by now how good Blade is. If you are pretty bored with critical builds, Kafka's DOT playstyle could give you a brand new gameplay experience. No, because if you're looking for a lightning damage dealer, everyone already has Serval for that. Serval is quite competitive for a free 4-star character. If you don't particularly like Kafka as a character, you can safely skip her and just build Serval. This way you can save your jades for a character that you truly like. And that's it for now. Like if you enjoyed the video and subscribe for more content.